Hello everyone. Our paper presentation topic is role-based access control. My group consists of me, that is Riya Bhagat, roll number 1, Parth Thosani, roll number 60, and Vrinda Batu, roll number 2. Now we shall proceed with the presentation. So starting with the introduction part, we know that US government has been heavily involved in developing the security technology for computers and communication systems for a longer period of time. This is due to their research and development going on through the part of Department of Defense in terms of security criteria interpretations that has been say about 20 plus years of research period. So now the best known US computer security is standard that is Trusted Computer System Evaluation Criteria, that is TCSEC. So this criteria is basically stating the security features and assurances that are exclusively derived, engineered and rationalized based on the DoD security policies. These have come into existence due to available market products related to security, and all the information gathered related to all the security issues have been used to develop these standards. The major aim and security objective can be stated as to prevent any unauthorized observation of the classified information. So basically, in 1983, according to TSEC's appearance in December, there were two major classification of access control, which were discretionary access control policy and mandatory access control policy. Till that date, there were no such policy of role based access control. So this paper basically focuses on existing a control which is also referred as role based access control, which can be more appropriate and central to secure the processing needs within the industry and the civilian government, instead of using DAC completely, which is not at all applicable in all the fields in the civilian government and industry. So this paper focuses majorly on highlighting that role based access control policy is one of the major access control which can play a great role in industry and civilian government. Now, starting with the aspects of security policy, recently we have observed a considerable attention being given to research and addressing the different security needs of commercial and civilian government organizations, as these governments and organizations rely heavily on information processing systems in their operational, financial, and various other requirements. So, their basic requirement of their software systems is to provide integrity, availability and confidentiality of the key software systems, which may be databases, data networks, which are their major concerns throughout all the sectors, as these are their major core things which are being used for their organizations. So different issues which lead to this need for security are, say, corruption, unauthorized disclosure or theft, or immediate or serious financial, legal, human safety, personal privacy and public confidence impact. All these issues relating to the organization operation led to these security needs in commercial and civilian government organizations. So now, talking about the aspects of role-based access control decisions are often determined by the roles an individual user takes part of an organization. It basically includes the specification of duties, their responsibilities, their qualifications. For example, the role of an individual associated with an hospital may be a nurse, a pharmacist, a doctor, and many more. Roles in a bank may include a teller, loan officer, accountant. Roles can also apply to military systems. For example, there may be a target analyst, a situation analyst, a traffic analyst. These are their common roles. So similarly, a role-based access control policy comes and makes decision on the functions of a user is allowed to perform within an organization. The users cannot access permissions to any other users at their discretion. This is the major fundamental difference between RBAC and DAC. As DAC, we were able to grant and revoke accesses to other users, but in RBAC this is prohibited. Now, further comparing MAC and RBAC, the act of granting membership and specifying the transactions for a role is somewhat analogous to process of clearing users and the labeling of objects, which are being done at the Department of Defense, that is usage of MSc. So the military policy is with respect to one type of capability, that is who can read what type of information. So for this system, the unauthorized flow of information cannot go from a higher level to a lower level. That is their principal concern. So there is a strict flow of information and strict policies related to that. But within a role-based system, the principal concern is protecting the integrity of the information, which is a major concern that we have seen within the civilian governments and the industry. So the major concern here is who can perform what act on what information. So what are the roles and what are their transactions related to what type of information is the basic logic which goes with RBAC and not with MAC. Now, further talking about the role-based access control in terms of distribution of the roles or what are the transactions and all. A role can be said to be a set of transactions that a user or a set of users can perform within a context of an organization. Say for example, these are the transactions which are allocated to these roles by a system administrator. So for example, the ability of a doctor to enter a diagnosis or prescribe a medication or add up to an entry of a record of treatment performed on a patient. These are the different types of transactions which are associated with their role. Similarly, a pharmacist may have a role which may include transactions to dispense but not include prescribing as a major part of their role. So membership in a role is also granted and revoked by a system administrator according to the roles. So a transaction can be thought of a transformation procedure or a program or a portion of program which has additional set of data items associated with it. So in addition, there are individual members related to each role. So we can say roles are group oriented in all.
Hello everyone, my name is Parth Hosani. I will formally describe RBAC, the important rules related to RBAC, the need for transaction rule, and the ease of administrating security using RBAC. Starting off with formal description of RBAC. To clarify the notions presented in previous section, RBAC is well defined with sets and relations. It is broadly comprised of 4 parts. Those are the active role of subject, authorized role of subject, transaction authorization for roles, and execution of transaction. So now coming to the jargons which represent RBAC. First being active role of a subject. So what is active role? So for each subject, the active role is the one that the subject is currently using. Authorized role of a subject. Each subject may be authorized to perform one or more roles. Transaction authorization for roles. Each role may be authorized to perform one or more transactions. What is execution of transaction? Subjects may execute transactions. The predicate EX execute is true if subject S can execute transaction T at the current time, otherwise it is false. Now we'll see rules for RBAC. The 3 basic rules required for RBAC are role assignment, role authorization, and transaction authorization. Role assignment. A subject can execute a transaction only if the subject has selected or been assigned a role. The identification and authentication process is not considered as a transaction. A subject has to have a role in order to execute any transaction related to it. Also, the role has to be active. It is impossible to carry out activities without transactions. So, eventually a user has to have a role assigned in order to complete the transaction and activities. Second rule is the authorization of a role of a user. the administrator assign roles and give authorization to the user. So the user's active role must be authorized. And here we can see that active role has to be subset of authorized role. The user can take roles for which they are authorized, and also they have to be active roles. The third rule of transaction authorization states that the user can perform transactions only if the subject's active role is authorized. It is also possible to redefine the meaning of transaction in the above rules to refer only the transformation procedure without including a binding to objects. This would require a fourth rule to enforce control over the modes in which users can access objects through transaction programs. It could be defined using transaction to object access function access, which indicates if it is permissible for a subject in role R to access object O in mod X using transaction T, where X is taken for some set of mods such as read, write, append. Note that Clark-Wilson access control triple could be implemented by letting modes X be the access modes required by transaction T and having one-to-one relationship between subjects and role. RBAC, as presented in this paper, thus includes Clark and Wilson access as a special case. For example, consider a case in a hospital setting. A doctor could be provided with read or write access to a prescription file, while the hospital pharmacist might have only read access. This alternate approach using the fourth rule might be helpful in enforcing confidentiality requirements. Another use of RBAC is to support integrity. Integrity has been defined in a variety of ways, but one aspect of integrity is requirement that data and processes must be modified only in authorized ways by the authorized users. These seem to be reasonable security objective for many real systems, and RBAC should be applicable to such systems. In general, the problem of determining whether data have been modified only in authorized ways can be complex as transaction that did the modification. For this reason, the practical approach is for transactions to be certified and trusted. Requiring the system to control access of transaction programs to objects through the access function used in Rule 4 might then be useful form of redundancy, but it could involve some significant overhead for a limited benefit in enforcing integrity requirements. Therefore, inclusion of a transaction to object access control function in RBAC would be useful in some but not in all applications. So now coming to administrative part of RBAC. RBAC is flexible in that it can take an organizational characteristic in terms of policy and structure. One of the RBAC's greatest virtues is the administrative capabilities it supports. Once the transaction of a role are established within a system, this transaction tend to remain relatively constant or change slowly over time. The administrative task consists of granting and revoking memberships to the set of specified named roles within the system. When a new person enters the organization, the administrator simply grants membership to an existing role. When a person's function changes within the organization, the user membership to his existing roles can be deleted and new ones can be generated. Finally, when a person leaves the organization, all memberships to all roles are deleted. For an organization that experiences a large turnover of personnel, a role-based security policy is the only logical choice. In addition to it, roles can be composed of roles. Now we'll see an example. A healer within a hospital can be composed of roles: healer, intern, and doctor. The figure depicts an example of such relationship. By granting membership to the role doctor, it implies access to all the transactions defined by intern and healer, as well as those of doctor. On the other hand, by granting membership to intern role, this implies transactions of the intern and healer, not the doctor. However, by granting membership to the healer role, this only allows access to those resources allowed under the role healer and not others. Now, Vrinda Bhatu will explain the following slides.
My name is Vrinda and I'm going to explain the following topics: principle of least privilege, the need of separation of duties, and the conclusion and the summary. So what is principle of least privilege? In information security, the principle of least privilege requires that in a particular abstraction layer of a computing environment, every module, such as a process, a user, or a program, depending on the subject, must be able to access only the information and resources that are necessary for its legitimate purpose. The principle means giving a user account only those privileges which are essential to perform its intended function. For example, a user account for the sole purpose of creating backups does not need to install a software. It has rights only to run the backup and backup related applications. Any other privileges, such as installing new software, are blocked. The principle applies also to the personal computer user who usually does work in a normal user account and opens a privileged password protected account only when a situation absolutely demands it. The principle of least privilege is widely recognized as an important design consideration in enhancing the protection of data and functionality from false and malicious behavior. Although the concept of least privilege currently exists within the context of TCSEC requirements restrict those privileges of the system administrator. Through the use of role-based access control, enforced minimum privileges for general system users can be easily achieved. Now let's talk about the benefits that principle include. First, better system stability. That is, when a code is limited in the scope of its changes it can make to a system, it is easier to test its possible actions and interactions with other applications. In practice, for example, applications running with restricted rights will not have access to perform operations that could crash a machine or adversely affect other applications running on the same machine. Second is better system security. When code is limited in the system-wide actions it may perform, vulnerabilities in one application cannot be used to exploit the rest of the machine. For example, Microsoft states, running in standard user mode gives customers increased protection against inadvertent system-level damage caused by shatter attacks and malware such as rootkits, spyware, and undetectable viruses. Third is the ease of deployment. In general, a fewer privileges an application requires, the easier it is to deploy within a larger environment. This usually results from the first two benefits. Applications that install device drivers or require elevated security privileges typically have additional steps involved in their deployment. For example, on Windows, a solution with no device drivers can be run directly with no installation, while device drivers must be installed separately using the Windows installer service in order to grant the driver elevated privileges. In practice, there exist multiple competing definitions of a true least privilege. Now let's talk about separation of duties. The system administrator can enforce the policy of separation of duties by using RBAC mechanisms. So what it requires is that in a particular set of transactions, no single individual should be allowed all the transactions of that particular set. For example, if we take a case of a bank, then let's consider two transactions. First is one who initializes the payment and second is one who authorizes that payment. Now, according to separation of duties, it says that no single individual should be capable of executing both of those transactions. In real situations, only certain transactions need to be restricted under separation of duty requirements. For example, we would expect a transaction for authorized payment to be restricted, but a transaction submit suggestion to administrator would not be. Now, to clearly understand the previous example, let's first understand the two different types of separation of duties, which are static or dynamic. In static separation, it requires that all the requirements can be determined simply by the assignment of individuals to roles and allocation of transactions to the roles, while in dynamic, the separation of duties can only be determined during the system operation. The main objective behind the dynamic separation is that it allows more flexibility in the operations, and we can understand this by taking an example. Consider the same case where one is initiating the payment and one is authorizing the payment. In a static policy, it requires that no individual who can serve as a payment initiator could also serve as the payment authorizer. This could be implemented by ensuring that no one who can perform the initiator role could also perform the authorizer role. Such a policy may be too rigid for commercial use, making the cost of security greater than the loss that might be expected without the security. As dynamic separation of duties is dynamically evaluated within the active session, it is more flexible and uh, and the individual can take both the roles, that is the initiator as well as the authorizer, with the exception that no one could authorize payments that he or she has initiated. The static policy could be implemented by checking only roles of the user. For the dynamic case, the system must use both role and user ID in checking access to transaction. The below diagrams also explain it, in which DoD relations place constraints on the roles that can be activated in user's session. If one role takes part in the DSG relation is activated, the user cannot activate the relation role in the same session. The dynamic separation of duty concept becomes especially important when utilizing RBAC hierarchical, where a senior role may contain conflicting separation of duty constraints. So now to summarize everything, we know that mostly the end users do not own the information for which they are allowed access. Now for such organizations, the corporations or agencies is the actual owner of the system objects, and discretionary access control may not be appropriate. Role-based access control is a non-discretionary access control mechanism which allows and promotes the central administration of an organization's specific security policy. As we know that access control decisions are often based on the roles individuals users take on as part of an organization, and so the role specifies a set of transactions that a user can perform within the context of that organization. Now RBAC provides the mean of naming and describing the relation between those rights and the individual, providing a method of meeting a secure processing needs for many commercial and civilian government organizations. So we discussed about the various forms of role-based access control have in the commercial system today, but there is no commonly accepted definition about it. So the definition proposed by this paper about the requirements and access control rules for RBAC could be used as the basis for the common definition of access control based on user roles. Thank you.